My name is Dorothy Mitchell. I'm 68 years old, and 3 days ago I buried my husband of 45 years in the same black dress I wore on our wedding day. Not because I wanted to be poetic, because it's the only formal dress I own. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. The Route 9 bus dropped me off at Miller & Sons Funeral Home at 9:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I checked my watch twice, trying to delay the moment I'd have to walk through those doors. My purse was the same vinyl one I'd carried for 12 years, the zipper broken since 2019, held together with a safety pin. I was smoothing down my dress when I heard the laughter. Kenneth and Evelyn pulled up in a black Tesla Model X, the kind with the doors that open upward like wings. My sister Angela sat in the back seat, wearing a camel-colored Max Mara coat I'd seen in a store window once, priced at $2,400. She saw me standing by the bus stop and looked away. They were laughing about something on Evelyn's phone. Kenneth's laugh was loud, the kind that carries across parking lots. Then Evelyn spotted me. She touched Kenneth's arm, and the laughter stopped like someone had flipped a switch. Kenneth got out first. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, probably custom. He didn't look at me as he walked past. Evelyn followed, her heels clicking on the pavement. She glanced at me, smiled slightly, and whispered something to Angela that made my sister press her lips together. I walked into my husband's funeral 40 feet behind my own family. Frank had wanted to be cremated. Simple service, no fuss, he'd said. But Kenneth insisted on something dignified. Translation, something expensive that I couldn't afford to argue about. The service was short. 17 people showed up, mostly regulars from Frank's diner. Joseph Chen sat in the back row, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. He'd been eating breakfast at our counter for 30 years. When it ended, Kenneth's lawyer, a thin man named Howard Breslin, asked us to stay. For the reading of the will, he said, adjusting his glasses. I expected we'd go to his office. Instead, Kenneth insisted we go to Frank's diner. It's what Dad would have wanted, he said, though Frank never wanted anyone making a fuss about anything. We drove separately. I took the bus. They took the Tesla. When I walked into the diner at 11:30 a.m., Evelyn was already sitting in the corner booth, the one where Frank sat every single morning at 5:30 a.m. for 40 years. She had her legs crossed, scrolling through her phone, sitting exactly where my husband had his last cup of coffee before the cancer made him too weak to leave the house. Kenneth sat across from her. Angela stood by the counter, arms crossed. Howard Breslin cleared his throat and opened the folder. The last will and testament of Franklin James Mitchell, dated January 8, 2024. 6 months before Frank died. He'd known he was dying and had planned everything. Howard read in that flat lawyer voice, "To my beloved son Kenneth, I leave the house at 324 Pine Ridge Avenue, Bend, Oregon, valued at approximately $420,000, free and clear of any encumbrances." Kenneth nodded once, like he'd been expecting it. "To my beloved wife Dorothy, I leave the property located at 1247 Commercial Street, including the building and business known as Frank's Diner, purchased in 1985. The diner. Frank left me the diner. The building was old, needed repairs, and on slow days we barely covered utilities. Kenneth got a $420,000 house. I got a restaurant with peeling paint and a roof that leaked every winter. I waited for Kenneth to say something. Anything. An acknowledgement that this wasn't fair, that we'd figure something out. Instead, he reached under the table and pulled out a cardboard box. It was old, dented on one corner with Mom's Memories written on the side in thick black marker. He pushed it across the table. "We cleaned out some of your stuff from the house," he said. "Figured you'd want it." I opened the box slowly. Inside were photographs. Our family photos. Kenneth's graduation, his wedding, Christmas mornings, birthday parties. Every single photo had been torn in half. My face was cut out of every image. In Kenneth's graduation photo, there was a jagged hole where I'd stood beside him. In his wedding photo, Frank stood alone where I'd been holding his arm. In the Christmas morning pictures, there were empty spaces next to the tree where I'd sat opening presents. At the bottom of the box was a note written on the back of a Starbucks receipt. "You don't need to pretend you're part of our lives anymore." Kenneth's handwriting. I looked up. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, flat, like I was a stranger asking for spare change. Evelyn glanced at the photos and smirked. Angela hugged Kenneth from behind and said, "You did the right thing, sweetheart." Sweetheart. My sister called my son sweetheart while he handed me a box of mutilated memories. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. Nobody said goodbye. I walked out of Frank's diner at 12:14 p.m., carrying a box of destroyed photographs, and rode the bus home in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2:30 a.m., I drove back to the diner. I still had my keys. I unlocked the door and turned on only the kitchen lights. The dining room stayed dark except for the streetlight glow coming through the windows. I walked to the counter and stared at the old Italian coffee maker Frank had used every morning since 1979. A Bialetti Mocha Express, dented and stained, bought at a yard sale for $3. He'd refuse to replace it. "This one makes the best coffee," he'd say. I'd never touched it. It was Frank's territory. But tonight, standing alone in the empty diner, I picked it up. Something rattled inside. I unscrewed the top. Tucked inside the filter was a yellowed envelope, folded twice to fit. I pulled it out with shaking hands and unfolded it under the kitchen light. The handwriting was Frank's, but shaky, written in his last days. "Mama, forgive me. I told him the truth before I died. The house was always yours. I never had the courage to admit it while I was alive. Now it's too late to fix my cowardice. Daddy." I read it 3 times. The house was always mine. Frank told Kenneth the truth before he died. I dropped to my knees on the cold tile floor, clutching the note against my chest, and for the first time since Frank died, I let myself cry. Chapter 2. The Escalation Focus. Increasing pressure from Kenneth, Evelyn, and Angela. Pod's discovery of documents, plus revelations about debts and manipulations. 3 days after Frank's funeral, I was wiping down the counter at the diner when I heard the key turn in the lock. I looked up. Kenneth and Evelyn walked in like they owned the place. They didn't knock. They didn't call ahead. Kenneth used the spare key Frank had given him years ago when he was still trying to teach our son about responsibility and family business. "Morning, Mom," Kenneth said. He didn't smile. He wore pressed khakis and a polo shirt, his hair gelled back. Evelyn followed in a white blazer and designer jeans, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I was holding a dish rag. My hands were wet. "The diner's closed today," I said. "I'm just cleaning." "We need to talk," Kenneth said, sliding into a booth without waiting for an invitation. Evelyn sat across from him and placed the portfolio on the table between them, perfectly centered. She looked around the diner with the expression of someone evaluating a condemned building. I stayed behind the counter. "Talk about what?" Kenneth leaned back, draping his arm across the top of the booth. "About your future, Mom. About this place." Evelyn opened the portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She slid it across the table toward me. "We want to buy the diner," she said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "We're offering $87,000. I stared at the number. $87,000? Cash, Kenneth added. Clean sale. You walk away? No headaches? No maintenance costs? No property taxes? You can rent a nice apartment, maybe travel a little." I looked from the paper to my son. "This building is worth at least $300,000. The location alone. It's worth what someone's willing to pay," Evelyn interrupted. "And we're willing to pay $87,000. Kenneth pulled out his phone and tapped the screen a few times. He turned it toward me. "That's exactly what you paid for the land in 1980, Mom. 44 years ago. We looked it up at the county recorder's office." My throat tightened. He'd researched the original purchase. He knew the exact amount. "That's not adjusted for inflation," I said quietly. "No," Evelyn agreed. "It's not, but it's a fair starting point considering Dad built everything this place became. The reputation, the customer base, the renovations. Without him, this is just an old building with outdated equipment." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Your father left me this diner because he wanted me to have it." Kenneth leaned forward. "Dad left you the diner because he felt guilty." The words hit me like a slap. Evelyn reached into the portfolio again and pulled out a thick stack of papers clipped together. She fanned them out on the table. Architectural drawings, 3D renderings, zoning permits. I stepped closer, squinting at the images. The first rendering showed Frank's diner demolished, completely gone. In its place stood a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek lines, and a green mermaid logo, Starbucks. "We've already been in contact with the franchise development team," Evelyn said, tapping one of the drawings with a manicured fingernail. "They're very interested in this location. High-foot traffic, visible from the highway, parking lot already paved. They've offered $480,000 for the property once we acquire it." I couldn't speak. I stared at the rendering of my husband's diner erased from existence, replaced by a corporate coffee chain. Kenneth stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "You get your $87,000. We handle the sale to Starbucks and pocket the rest. Everybody wins." Everybody wins, I repeated slowly. You didn't build this place, Mom, Kenneth said, still looking out the window. Dad did. You just worked here. Evelyn gathered the papers and slid them back into the portfolio. We'll give you until Friday to think it over. After that, we'll need to explore other options. They left the same way they came in. No goodbye, no hug. Just the sound of the door closing and the Tesla pulling out of the parking lot. I stood in the middle of the empty diner for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. That night, my phone rang at 10:43 p.m. Angela. I almost didn't answer. But she was my sister. My only living family besides Kenneth. Hello? Dorothy, it's me. Her voice was tight, clipped. I heard about Kenneth's offer. Relief flooded through me. Finally, someone who understood how absurd this was. Angela, they want to pay $87,000 for a property worth. You should take it. I stopped breathing. What? You should take the money and move on, Angela said. Kenneth has his own life now. His own family. You can't expect him to support you forever. He's not supporting me. Frank left me the diner. Frank left you the diner because he felt sorry for you, Angela interrupted. Her voice rose slightly, an edge creeping in. You always had everything easy, Dorothy. Frank adored you. You had the restaurant, the customers who loved you, this perfect little life. Do you have any idea what the rest of us went through? My hand tightened around the phone. What are you talking about? I spent 40 years cleaning wounds and emptying bedpans at Mercy Hospital, Angela said. Her words came faster now, angrier. I worked night shifts, double shifts, holidays. I never had a Frank. I never had a business. I never had anything that was mine. Angela, let Kenneth have this, she said. He deserves it. He's been patient with you. He's been respectful. And now he's offering you a way out. Stop being selfish. The line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The next morning, I started looking. If Frank had written one note, maybe there were others. I went through the diner systematically. Every drawer, every cabinet, every box in the storage room. At 2 p.m., I moved to the apartment above the diner where Frank and I had lived for 15 years before buying the house. I pulled down boxes from the closet. Old tax returns, receipts, birthday cards from Kenneth when he was still young enough to sign them, Love, Kenny. Then I saw it. A framed photograph of Kenneth's wedding, sitting face down on a shelf. I pulled it out. The glass was cracked, a spiderweb fracture across the image. I turned it over to check the back of the frame for damage. That's when I felt it. Something taped to the backing. I pried the frame apart carefully. Behind the photograph, secured with yellowed Scotch tape, was a folded piece of paper, a receipt. Property sale receipt. Date, March 15th, 1983. Buyer, Dorothy Ann Mitchell. Property, 324, Pine Ridge Avenue, Bend, Oregon. Purchase price, $87,000 payment. Method, personal check, viewer 477. Seller, Cascade Realty and Development. Below the printed text was a signature line. My signature, Dorothy A. Mitchell in my own handwriting from 42 years ago. I bought the house, not Frank. Me. I paid $87,000 in 1983 with money I'd saved working double shifts as a waitress and taking extra catering jobs on weekends. Frank's restaurant was still struggling back then. We barely made rent some months. But I'd saved every dollar I could. And when the house on Pine Ridge Avenue went up for sale, I bought it. Frank's name wasn't on the deed. It never had been. So why did the will say Kenneth inherited the house from his father? I sat on the floor of the apartment, holding the receipt, and felt something crack open inside my chest. Not sadness. Something sharper. Anger. I called Joseph Chen at 4:17 p.m. Joseph, it's Dorothy. I need a lawyer. Dorothy, of course. What's wrong? Everything, I said. Can you come to the diner? Now? Joseph arrived 30 minutes later, carrying a briefcase and wearing the same concerned expression he'd had 20 years ago, when I'd saved his life doing chest compressions on the diner floor while we waited for the ambulance. I owe you my life, he'd said that day in the hospital. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. I handed him the receipt. He studied it for a long moment, then looked up at me. Kenneth inherited a house you purchased? Apparently. Joseph opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal pad. Tell me everything. I told him about the will, the $87,000 offer, Evelyn's renderings, Angela's phone call. Joseph took notes, his jaw tightening with each detail. When I finished, he closed the notepad. I need to do some research. Can I take this receipt? Make a copy. I want to keep the original. Joseph pulled out his phone and photographed the receipt from 3 angles. Then he handed it back to me. Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay, do you think Kenneth knew about this? that you bought the house? I thought about the box of torn photographs, the cold look in his eyes, the way Evelyn had smiled when she said, "You just worked here." "Yes," I said. I think he knew. Joseph nodded slowly. "I'll be back tomorrow. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And Dorothy, lock your doors." He left at 6:30 p.m. I locked the diner and went upstairs to the apartment. I made tea, but I didn't drink it. I just sat at the kitchen table staring at the receipt until the sun went down. At 9 p.m., I remembered the cookbook, the old Italian recipe book I'd used to make Frank's birthday cake every year. Torta della nonna, grandmother's cake, Frank's favorite. I pulled the book off the shelf. The spine was cracked, pages stained with flour and butter from decades of use. I flipped to the tiramisu recipe, the one I'd made for our anniversary every year. A piece of paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. I picked it up. Frank's handwriting again. Dated 2 weeks before he died. "Dorothy, forgive me for letting you believe the house was mine. I lied to feel like a provider. The truth always scared my pride. Now it's too late. F." I read it 3 times. Frank had known all along. For 42 years, he'd let me believe we'd bought the house together. He'd let Kenneth believe the house belonged to him. And now Kenneth had inherited something that was never Frank's to give. My phone buzzed. A text message from Kenneth. "We need an answer by Friday. After that, things get complicated for you." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I deleted it. I didn't reply. For 5 days, I didn't open the diner. I told myself I was cleaning, organizing, preparing to reopen. But the truth was simpler and darker. I couldn't face the customers. I couldn't smile and pour coffee and pretend everything was normal when my entire life had been built on a lie. I sat in every booth, at every table. I reconstructed conversations from memory, searching for clues I'd missed. Table 6, by the window. That's where Frank proposed in 1979. He'd been nervous, stirring his coffee for 10 minutes before he finally pulled out the ring. "Dorothy, you're the most beautiful woman who ever walked through that door," he'd said. I'd cried and said yes, and kissed him in front of 12 customers who applauded. Had he been lying even then? Booth 3, right corner. That's where Kenneth sat on his 8th birthday. Chocolate pancakes with whipped cream. Frank taught him to flip a quarter across his knuckles. Kenneth laughed so hard he snorted milk through his nose. When did my son stop laughing like that? The counter. That's where Frank stood on January 9th, 2024, after coming back from the doctor. He'd gripped the edge with both hands, knuckles white, and said, "Stage 4, 3 months, maybe 6. I'd held him while he cried into my shoulder. 3 days later, he wrote the note in the coffee maker. Every memory was contaminated now. Every moment suspect. On the afternoon of the 4th day, I found the diaries. They were in the storage room upstairs, inside a cardboard box labeled Tax Records 1985-1990 in Frank's handwriting. But when I opened it, there were no tax records, just 5 spiral notebooks. The cheap kind you buy at drugstores, with water-stained covers and pages warped from age. I sat on the floor and opened the first one. June 15th, 1983. Today. Dorothy signed the papers for the house. She used her savings, every dollar she'd put away working those awful double shifts at the hospital cafeteria. $87,000. She was so proud. "Our house," she kept saying. "Our home." I let her say it. I let her believe we bought it together. But it was her money. All of it. I didn't contribute a dime. The restaurant barely breaks even most months. A man needs to feel like a provider. That's what my father always said. A man who can't provide isn't a man. So I let her believe it was ours. God forgive me for that lie. I turned pages, skipping years. November 3rd, 1995. Kenneth asked me today whose name was on the house deed. He's 13, curious about everything lately. I told him it was mine. Dorothy was standing right there in the kitchen making dinner. She heard me say it. She didn't correct me. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she doesn't remember that it was her money, her signature, her name on the original deed back in '83. Or maybe she's letting me have this one thing, this one piece of dignity. The lie is so big now it lives on its own. I wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about it. But I don't know how to take it back. More pages, more years. January 8th, 2024. I told Kenneth the truth yesterday. Sat him down after the diagnosis, after the doctor told me I had 3 months, maybe 6. Told him the house was never really mine, that his mother bought it with her own money 42 years ago. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stared at me. Then he stood up and walked out. Evelyn called 2 hours later, said I'd destroyed their future, said I'd ruined everything they'd planned. I don't know what she meant, but her voice was cold, scary cold. Maybe I should have kept lying. I closed the diary and pressed it against my chest. Frank had known. For 42 years he'd carried the lie, and it had eaten him alive. And Kenneth had known the truth for 6 months before Frank died. 6 months to process it. 6 months to plan. That night at 9:15 p.m., someone knocked on the diner door. I looked through the window. Kenneth, Evelyn, and Angela stood under the streetlight. My first instinct was not to answer, but Angela saw me through the glass. She waved. I unlocked the door. "We were worried about you," Angela said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You haven't answered your phone in days." Kenneth and Evelyn followed her in. Evelyn carried a pink thermal bag, the expensive kind with a shoulder strap. "We brought you something," Evelyn said, setting the bag on the counter. She unzipped it and pulled out a thermos. "Chamomile tea, special blend. I know you haven't been sleeping well." She poured steaming tea into a paper cup and handed it to me. The smell was herbal, floral, safe. "That's very kind," I said, taking the cup. It was hot. I blew on it. "Drink up," Angela said, smiling. "It'll help you relax." I sipped. The tea tasted bitter, medicinal. I swallowed and tried not to grimace. "How are you feeling, Mom?" Kenneth asked. He leaned against the counter, casual. "You seem stressed." "I'm fine," I said. I took another sip to be polite. The bitterness coated my tongue. "We've been thinking," Evelyn said, pulling out a chair and sitting down at the nearest table. "About the offer, about your future. We want to make sure you're taken care of." My head felt light. The edges of the room softened. "Taken care of," I repeated. My voice sounded distant. Kenneth pulled papers from his jacket pocket and laid them on the counter. "This is just a standard power of attorney, Mom. It gives me the authority to handle your finances, pay your bills, manage the property, make sure everything's organized." The words on the paper swam. I blinked hard, trying to focus. "Power of attorney," I said slowly. "Just sign here." Kenneth placed a pen in my hand. My fingers felt numb, heavy. I tried to read the document, but the letters danced and blurred. I need to." "It's okay, Mom." Kenneth guided my hand to the signature line. "Just sign. It's for your protection." My right hand wouldn't move. It felt disconnected from my body. Kenneth took my left hand instead. "I'm right-handed. I've been right-handed my entire life." Kenneth pressed the pen into my left fingers and wrapped my hand around it. He placed my hand on the paper and pushed down. The signature that came out was shaky, illegible, wrong. "Perfect," Evelyn said. She took the paper and folded it carefully, sliding it into her purse. They left 10 minutes later, or maybe it was an hour. Time felt elastic, unreliable. I sat at the counter, staring at the empty paper cup. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I stood up, gripping the counter for balance. My legs trembled. I stumbled toward the bathroom. The taste, the bitter, medicinal taste. Frank had kept a list taped inside the medicine cabinet. Drug interactions. Dangerous, written at the top in his careful handwriting. He'd been obsessive about it after his diagnosis, checking every medication, every supplement, every herbal tea. I yanked open the cabinet door. The list was still there, yellowed and curled at the edges. I scanned the list with swimming vision. Zolpidem, Ambien, plus valerian root extract, severe confusion, respiratory depression, possible coma. Valerian root. The tea had tasted like valerian root. I was on blood pressure medication. Lisinopril, 10 mirror daily. They drugged me. My stomach lurched. I dropped to my knees in front of the toilet and shoved 2 fingers down my throat. I vomited violently, again and again, until there was nothing left but bile and the sour taste of chamomile. I stayed on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes, shaking, sweating, waiting for my head to clear. They'd tried to drug me, to make me sign away control of everything while I was incapacitated, and they'd almost succeeded. I crawled to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale, hollow-eyed, old, but alive, and angry. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steadier now. I dialed Joseph's number. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy. "Dorothy, it's almost midnight. Are you okay?" "No," I said. My voice was hoarse from vomiting. "I'm not okay. Joseph, they tried to drug me. They tried to make me sign a power of attorney while I was incapacitated." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm coming over. Right now. Don't open the door for anyone but me." "Joseph, wait. Bring something. What do you need?" "A camera," I said. "A recording device. And a doctor you trust." Another pause. "What are you planning, Dorothy?" I looked at my reflection one more time. The old woman in the mirror stared back, eyes hard. "This ends tomorrow," I said. "Whatever it takes." I hung up and sat down on the closed toilet lid, waiting for Joseph to arrive. Outside, a car drove past slowly. A black Tesla. I watched it through the bathroom window until it disappeared down the street. They were watching me. Good. Let them watch. Joseph Chen arrived at 6:30 a.m. with a man carrying a medical bag. "This is Dr. Raymond Patel," Joseph said. "Toxicologist at Bend Memorial. He's discreet and he owes me a favor." Dr. Patel didn't waste time. He drew blood from my arm in the diner kitchen, filling 3 vials with dark red liquid. "I'll rush the tests. We should have results by this afternoon." He left at 7 a.m. Joseph stayed. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said, opening his laptop at one of the tables. I told him everything. The tea, the papers, Kenneth forcing my left hand to sign. Joseph typed rapidly, his expression darkening with each detail. "That's felony coercion," he said. "Possibly attempted poisoning, depending on what the blood work shows. Will it hold up in court?" "If the signature analysis supports your story, yes." He pulled out his phone. "I know a forensic document examiner, former FBI. She's the best." By noon, Dr. Patel called. "Ms. Mitchell, your blood tested positive for zolpidem at 47 nanograms per milliliter, well above therapeutic levels. There's also evidence of valerian root extract and possibly diphenhydramine. That combination is extremely dangerous, especially for someone on blood pressure medication." I put the phone on speaker so Joseph could hear. "Could it cause confusion?" Joseph asked. "Impaired judgment?" "Absolutely. At those levels, she would have been significantly impaired. Disoriented, possibly close to losing consciousness. It's frankly remarkable she was able to induce vomiting." Joseph thanked him and hung up. He looked at me. "We have them." The document examiner arrived at 2 p.m. as a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Eng, who spent 40 minutes analyzing the signature on the power of attorney. "This was signed with the left hand," she said, pointing to the trembling loops and irregular pressure. "The writer is right-handed, based on the natural slant and control evident in comparison signatures. This was signed under duress or impairment. I'll stake my professional reputation on it." Joseph leaned back in his chair. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something. I've been investigating Frank's finances since yesterday." "And? Your husband was more careful than you knew." Joseph pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I found stock certificates hidden in the diner, behind the mirror in the men's bathroom." I blinked. "The broken mirror? The one Frank always said he'd fix but never did." Joseph smiled slightly. He wasn't being lazy. He was hiding something. He spread the certificates across the table. Netflix, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. "Frank started buying tech stocks in the mid-1990s, Joseph explained. Small amounts, $50 to $200 a month. He hid the purchases in cash transactions so they wouldn't show up in your joint checking account. But all the shares are held in a joint account. Frank Mitchell and Dorothy Mitchell." I stared at the numbers. "How much?" Joseph handed me a printout. "Current market value, $890,000. The room tilted slightly. "Kenneth doesn't know about this," Joseph continued. "The stocks weren't listed in Frank's will because they're not part of his estate. They're jointly owned. They passed directly to you upon his death. No probate, no taxes, no inheritance distribution. $890,000, I repeated. "Frank was protecting you," Joseph said quietly. "Maybe he knew Kenneth would come after the diner. Maybe he knew you'd need resources to fight back." I touched one of the certificates. Frank's signature, right next to mine from decades ago. A signature I didn't remember signing, but it was definitely mine. "There's more," Joseph said. He pulled out another folder. Kenneth's debts. He laid out bank statements, loan documents, demand letters from collection agencies. "Your son owes $347,000 to various creditors. The largest single debt is $180,000 to a man named Victor Reyes, unlicensed lender, street terms. 22% interest compounding weekly. A loan shark," I said. "Yes. Kenneth took out the loan 18 months ago, supposedly for a real estate investment that fell through. He's been making minimum payments, but the principal keeps growing. Reyes has been threatening legal action." Joseph pulled out another document. This is worse. Kenneth took out a second mortgage on the Pine Ridge house 3 months ago without proper authorization. He forged Frank's signature on the loan documents while Frank was in hospice care. My stomach clenched. Can he do that? No. It's fraud. And since you're the actual owner of the house, as proven by the 1983 receipt, Kenneth committed fraud against you, not against Frank's estate. Joseph wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. A man in his 40s with slicked back hair and expensive sunglasses, standing next to Evelyn outside a motel. That's Victor Reyes, Joseph said. The loan shark. Recognize the woman? My throat went dry. Evelyn. This was taken 2 weeks ago. Joseph swiped to another photo. The same couple, kissing in a parking lot. Another swipe. Evelyn and Victor entering a hotel room. How long has this been going on? I asked. We think from the beginning. Joseph pulled up a background check on his laptop. Victor Reyes and Evelyn Reyes, cousins, both from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Both entered the U.S. on tourist visas in 2015. Victor overstayed his visa and went underground. Evelyn did too. She's illegal? Yes. And she's been using a false social security number for employment purposes. Joseph showed me another document. Victor introduced Evelyn to Kenneth in 2017 at a real estate seminar. Kenneth didn't know they were related. It was a setup, I said slowly. From the beginning, we believe so. The theory is, Victor loaned Kenneth money, knowing he couldn't pay it back. Evelyn married Kenneth to get access to family assets. The plan was to push you out, liquidate the diner, pay off the debt, and disappear. Joseph pulled out one final document, a medical ultrasound report. Evelyn is pregnant. 12 weeks. She had a paternity test done at a private clinic in Portland 3 weeks ago. He pointed to a line on the report. Alleged father, Victor Manuel Reyes. I stared at the paper. Kenneth doesn't know. No. He thinks the baby is his. I sat in silence, processing everything. My son had been manipulated, betrayed, used as a pawn, but he'd also tried to drug me, steal from me, erase me. What do we do? I asked. Joseph closed his laptop. We fight back. But Dorothy, they're not going to take this quietly. Once they realize you're not signing over the diner, they'll escalate. As if on cue, the diner door burst open. Kenneth stormed in, face red, Evelyn right behind him. Angela followed, looking nervous. What the hell are you doing, Mom? Kenneth shouted. I just got a call from my bank. They're freezing my accounts because of some fraud investigation. Joseph stood calmly. Mr. Mitchell, I'm Joseph Chen, your mother's attorney. Perhaps we should discuss this civilly. Civilly? Kenneth laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're trying to destroy my life. Your mother is protecting herself from financial exploitation, Joseph said evenly. Evelyn stepped forward. Dorothy, you're not thinking clearly. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been erratic, paranoid. I'm not paranoid, I said. I'm informed. Kenneth slammed his hand on the counter. This is insane. Mom, you're sick. You're confused. You need help. I need help? I stood up. I'm not the one who drugged his own mother. Evelyn's face went pale. Kenneth's eyes widened. We have blood tests, Joseph said calmly. Toxicology reports, forensic signature analysis, all of which will be submitted as evidence if you continue down this path. Kenneth's voice dropped to something colder. Fine, if that's how you want to play it. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Harrison, it's Kenneth Mitchell. Yes, I need that evaluation paperwork we discussed. He hung up and looked at me. I'm having you declared mentally incompetent, Mom. Dr. Harrison is a geriatric psychiatrist. He's agreed to evaluate you for dementia and cognitive decline. Once he signs off, we'll have you placed in assisted care at Green Valley. Green Valley costs $8,500 a month, Angela added quietly. We've already reserved a room. Joseph didn't flinch. Any attempt to have Ms. Mitchell declared incompetent will be met with evidence of your fraud, forgery, and attempted poisoning. We'll see who ends up in an institution. Kenneth stared at me with pure hatred. You're really going to do this? Destroy your own son? You destroyed yourself, I said. They left without another word. Joseph locked the door behind them. They'll come back. Probably with the doctor. Probably with paperwork. Let them, I said. Joseph smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Dorothy, there's one more thing. He pulled out an envelope. Photos from a private investigator. Taken yesterday. I opened it. Evelyn and Victor at a medical clinic. Evelyn and Victor at a jewelry store, looking at rings. Evelyn and Victor at a travel agency, holding brochures for Mexico. They're planning to run, Joseph said, as soon as they get your money. I stared at the photos of my son's wife with another man, planning a future that didn't include Kenneth. Then we don't let them get it, I said. I sent the text message on Tuesday morning. Kenneth, let's talk. Friday, 7 p.m. The diner. Just family. Please. He replied within 5 minutes. Fine. I spent 3 days preparing. Joseph installed 3 hidden cameras, one behind the antique Coca-Cola sign, one above the kitchen pass-through, and one disguised as a smoke detector. Audio recorders were placed under 2 tables. On Friday morning, I went to the storage room and pulled out Frank's recipe box, the one he'd kept since 1978, written in his careful handwriting on index cards stained with oil and tomato sauce. Steak in Madeira sauce, roasted potatoes with rosemary, Caesar salad, and a bottle of Chianti Classico Riserva 1975. The same meal Frank made for our first real date, when we were just a waitress and a short-order cook who'd fallen stupidly in love. This wine makes people honest, Frank had said that night, pouring my glass. Too honest, sometimes. My grandmother always served it at family dinners when there were secrets to uncover. I'd laughed then. I wasn't laughing now. Joseph arrived at 6 p.m. with Detective Marcus Webb, a plainclothes officer who'd agreed to observe from a corner booth. They ordered coffee and pie, playing their parts perfectly. At 6:45 p.m., Angela arrived first. She wore a blue cardigan and looked nervous. Dorothy, I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, she said, sitting at a table near the window. I didn't respond. I just kept cooking. Kenneth and Evelyn arrived at 7:03 p.m. Evelyn wore a cream-colored dress that showed the slight curve of her belly. Kenneth wore jeans and a button-down shirt, his jaw tight. Smells good, Kenneth said, sitting down across from Angela. It was the first almost kind thing he'd said to me in weeks. I brought the food out on Frank's old serving platters. The steak was perfect, medium rare, the way Frank used to make it. The potatoes were crispy on the outside, soft inside. The salad was simple, classic, and the wine. I poured it carefully into 4 glasses, leaving mine empty. You're not drinking? Evelyn asked. I'm on medication. I lied. Doctor's orders. Kenneth picked up his glass and drank deeply. Evelyn sipped hers. Angela took a small taste and set it down. We ate in silence for several minutes. Then I brought out the coffee. I'd chosen the cups carefully. For Kenneth, a plain white mug. For Angela, a floral one she'd given me years ago. For Evelyn, a delicate porcelain cup with blue flowers and a visible crack running down the handle. Evelyn frowned when she saw it. This cup is broken. You broke it, I said quietly, setting it in front of her. Christmas 2019. You were gesturing with your hands, telling a story about a yoga retreat. Your elbow caught the handle. It shattered on the floor. Evelyn stared at the cup. I don't remember that. I do. I saved every piece. I glued it back together with epoxy designed for ceramics. Took me 3 hours. I sat down across from her. Some things that break can be fixed. Others can't. The table went quiet. Kenneth drank more wine, his 3rd glass. Evelyn was on her 2nd. Her cheeks flushed. Why did you invite us here, Mom? Kenneth asked. To talk about family, I said. About honesty. About the things we hide from each other. Angela shifted uncomfortably. Dorothy, maybe this isn't the time. When is the time, Angela? I looked at my sister. When were you going to tell me the truth? What truth? Her voice was small. That you've been sabotaging my marriage for 40 years. Angela's face went white. I found Frank's diaries, I continued. All of them. He wrote about the letters that went missing. The ones he'd write to me when he was traveling for restaurant supply trips. He'd mail them, but I never got them. Because you worked at the post office back then, didn't you, Angela? You had access. Angela's hands trembled. I don't know what you're talking about. He wrote about the lies you told him. Small things at first. Dorothy said she doesn't like flowers anymore. Dorothy mentioned she wishes you'd work less. Things designed to create distance between us. A tear rolled down Angela's cheek. Why? I asked. She grabbed her wine glass and drained it. When she spoke, her voice cracked. Because I loved him. From the moment you brought him home in 1978. I loved Frank. He was kind and funny, and he looked at you like you were the only person in the world. Nobody ever looked at me like that. Kenneth stared at his aunt. You were in love with Dad? For 40 years, Angela whispered. I tried everything to make him see me, but he only ever saw Dorothy. Perfect Dorothy with her perfect life and her perfect husband. She looked at me with something like hatred. So yes, I sabotaged you. I stole letters. I planted doubts. I tried to make him question whether you really loved him, but it never worked. He loved you too much. The silence was suffocating. Evelyn, emboldened by wine, laughed. A short, sharp sound. Well, that's pathetic. Kenneth turned to her. Excuse me? Your aunt spent 40 years pining for a man who didn't want her. That's pathetic. Evelyn drank more wine. At least I'm smarter than that. What does that mean? Kenneth's voice had an edge. It means, Evelyn said, her words slightly slurred, that I don't waste time on lost causes. I leaned forward. Evelyn, how did you meet Kenneth? She blinked at me. At a real estate seminar. You know this. And who introduced you? A friend. Victor. He's in the investment business. Victor Reyes, I said. Yeah, so what? He's your cousin. Evelyn's smile faltered. That's not... We have immigration records, Joseph said, emerging from the kitchen. He placed a folder on the table. Evelyn Maria Reyes and Victor Manuel Reyes. First cousins. Both from São Paulo. Both entered the U.S. on tourist visas in 2015. Both overstayed. Kenneth looked at his wife. You told me you met Victor at the seminar. I did, Evelyn said quickly. You told me he was just a business acquaintance. Evelyn said nothing. Joseph placed another document on the table. A photograph. Evelyn and Victor kissing outside a motel. Kenneth stared at it. What is this? Your wife has been having an affair with Victor Reyes for the entire duration of your marriage, Joseph said calmly. We have dates, locations, financial records showing joint purchases. That's a lie. Evelyn stood up, swaying slightly. Joseph placed another photo down. Evelyn and Victor at a jewelry store. Another photo. Evelyn and Victor at a travel agency. You're pregnant, Kenneth said, his voice hollow. Yes, with your... Joseph placed a medical report on the table. Paternity test results from a private clinic in Portland, performed 3 weeks ago. The biological father is Victor Manuel Reyes. Kenneth stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Kenneth, let me explain. Evelyn reached for him. Don't touch me. He backed away from her, his face twisted in anguish. You used me. This whole time you used me. You were easy to use, Evelyn shouted back, the wine stripping away her careful facade. Victor told me you were desperate, in debt, weak. He said you'd be easy to manipulate, and he was right. You believed every word I said. You did everything I told you to do. The baby isn't mine, Kenneth said, more to himself than to anyone else. No, it's not, Evelyn said coldly. And we were going to take your mother's money and leave, Victor and me. We were going to Mexico. We had tickets. We had a plan. She laughed bitterly. But your stupid mother wouldn't cooperate. Kenneth turned to me. His eyes were wild, lost. Mom, You tried to drug me, I said quietly. You tried to steal from me. You cut my face out of photographs. I thought... His voice broke. Dad told me you bought the house and I felt like such a failure, like I'd been living in your shadow my whole life. And Evelyn said, she said you were holding me back, that you were the reason I couldn't succeed, and I believed her. He looked at the table where Frank's old chess set had sat for 30 years, the one Frank used to teach him chess every Sunday morning. Kenneth walked to it slowly. He picked it up, holding the wooden board that Frank had carved by hand. He taught me to play on this, Kenneth whispered. Every Sunday. He was so patient, and I told him he was a liar. 3 days before he died, I called him a liar and walked out. Kenneth raised the chessboard above his head. I destroyed everything he built. He smashed the board against the wall. It splintered into pieces. He fell to his knees, sobbing, surrounded by broken wood and scattered chess pieces. Detective Webb stood, revealing his badge. Evelyn Reyes, you're under arrest for fraud and conspiracy. Evelyn tried to run. She didn't make it to the door. Angela sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. Dorothy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I walked to Kenneth. He was still on his knees, shoulders shaking. I knelt beside him and whispered something only he could hear. Your father left you a letter. He forgave you before he died, and so do I. But you only get one chance to fix this. Kenneth looked at me with red, swollen eyes. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Mom. Your father always said everyone deserves a second chance, I said. But only one. The criminal charges came fast. Evelyn Reyes was arrested for attempted murder through drugging, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and identity theft. She spent 2 nights in county jail before Immigration and Customs Enforcement flagged her case. Illegal for 10 years. False social security number. Fraudulent marriage potentially for immigration benefits. Her deportation hearing lasted 18 minutes. On August 12, 2025, Evelyn was escorted onto a flight to São Paulo. She was 4 months pregnant. Victor Reyes's family in Brazil refused to take her calls. The baby was born in January 2026. A boy. Evelyn's mother sent Kenneth a photo once. He looked at it for 30 seconds and deleted it. Victor Reyes got 16 months in federal prison for operating an unlicensed lending business and extortion. Kenneth's $180,000 debt was nullified as proceeds from illegal activity. Angela didn't go to jail. I gave her something worse. "You're going to work here," I told her the day after the confrontation. 40 hours a week, 2 years. You'll bus tables, wash dishes, sweep floors. No salary, tips only. You'll wear a name tag that says Angela, here to serve. Her face crumpled. "Dorothy, please." "Maybe by serving others, you'll learn what it means to serve your own family," I said. "Or you can refuse, and I'll make sure everyone in town knows exactly what you did to Frank and me for 40 years. She started on Monday. Watching my sister, who'd spent a lifetime feeling superior to me, scrape plates and refill coffee cups was its own kind of justice. Kenneth lost everything. The house reverted to me through the 1983 deed. I sold it in October for $445,000. Kenneth didn't get a penny. His bank accounts were frozen during the fraud investigation. His credit cards were maxed out. He moved out of the Pine Ridge house with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. I let him sleep in his car for 3 days. On the 4th day, I called him. "Come to the diner." He arrived at noon, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he'd had on the day before. I poured him coffee. He didn't touch it. "You have 2 options," I said. "Option 1, you leave Bend and I never see you again. Option 2, you stay and work. Work where? Here. You'll live in the apartment upstairs. You'll manage the diner. No salary for 2 years. Just room and board. After 2 years, we renegotiate. But if you steal, if you lie, if you fail, even once, you're out. Forever." Kenneth stared at his coffee. "Why would you do this?" "Because your father believed in second chances," I said. "And because you're still my son." He started the next day. I used Frank's $890,000 to transform the diner. Not into a Starbucks. Into something Frank would have loved. Frank's Place, Support Center for Widows, opened on August 15, 2025, our 46th wedding anniversary. Free breakfast and lunch for any widow who needed it. Legal counseling through Joseph's volunteer network. Support groups, financial literacy workshops, a bulletin board for job postings and housing assistance. The community responded. Donations came in. Volunteers signed up. Within 3 months, we were serving 60 women a day. Kenneth worked quietly. He arrived at 5 a.m. to prep. He served coffee with Angela. He cleaned tables. He said, "Yes, ma'am, and thank you." And he never, not once, complained. But I watched him. In February 2026, Joseph called me to his office. "Frank left this with me 2 years ago," he said, handing me a sealed envelope, "with instructions to give it to you only after you'd won." His words. I opened it alone that night, sitting in the empty diner. Frank's final letter, dated January 10, 2024. "My Dorothy, if you're reading this, you won. You survived. You fought back. I always knew Evelyn was bad. I saw it at our 3rd Christmas dinner when she asked how much the diner was worth. Not because she cared about family history, because she was calculating. I started gathering evidence, recordings, documents, photographs. I was going to tell you everything, but the cancer moved faster than I expected. I told Kenneth the truth about the house 2 weeks before I died. I wanted him to understand that you were stronger, more valuable, more worthy than any property. I wanted him to respect you. He got angry instead, called me a liar, said I'd humiliated him. I died knowing our family was broken, but I trusted that you, my love, would fix what I couldn't. The house was always yours. The stocks were always ours. But the love was always real. Forgive our son. He's weak, like I was weak. But weakness can become strength when there's someone strong enough to guide the way. You were always my strength, Dorothy. I love you forever. Frank P.S. Your pancakes are better than mine. Don't tell anyone. I folded the letter and cried for the first time since the funeral. Not sad tears. Relief tears. On June 15, 2026, the 2nd anniversary of Frank's death, Kenneth and I reopened the diner at 5:30 a.m., the exact time Frank always opened. Kenneth wore Frank's blue apron. It was a little big on him, but he'd grown thinner over the past year. Harder. More careful. Our first customer was Martha Hendricks, 72, whose husband died 3 months earlier. She ordered pancakes and coffee. Kenneth served her with steady hands. "These were my dad's recipe," he said quietly. "He made them perfect every time." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "I miss my husband so much." Kenneth sat down next to her. "I lost my dad a year ago. It still hurts, but it hurts less when you're around people who understand. I watched from the kitchen, drying my hands on a towel. When Kenneth came back, he looked different, lighter somehow, like he'd put down something heavy. "Mom," he said, "thank you for not giving up on me." I almost said, "You're welcome." Almost said, "I forgive you." Almost said, "Your father would be proud." But then I saw it. Kenneth pulled his phone from his pocket to check the time. A notification flashed on the screen, a text message from a number I didn't recognize. He read it. His expression didn't change. He deleted it quickly and put the phone away. "Who was that?" I asked. "Nobody. Wrong number." He went back to the dining room. I stood in the kitchen, watching him through the pass-through window. He smiled at Martha. He refilled her coffee. He looked like the son I'd raised. But I'd also raised the son who drugged me, who cut my face from photographs, who chose Evelyn over me. Angela walked past carrying a tray of dirty dishes. She'd lost 15 pounds from the work. Her hands were rough from washing dishes. She didn't make eye contact. 2 years of this. For her. For Kenneth. 2 years to prove they'd changed. But what if they hadn't? What if Kenneth was just better at hiding now? What if Angela was just waiting for her sentence to end so she could disappear? What if the deleted text message was the beginning of another lie? I didn't know. And maybe I'd never know. Redemption isn't guaranteed. It's earned one cup of coffee at a time. Forgiveness isn't instant. It's cultivated through consistent actions. Frank's legacy wasn't wealth. It was love that survived betrayal. I didn't seek revenge. I offered Kenneth the same second chance Frank always believed everyone deserves. But as I washed dishes that morning, watching my son serve pancakes to a grieving widow, I wondered, had Kenneth really changed? Or was he just waiting for the next opportunity? I dried the last plate and hung up the towel. Outside, the sun was rising over Bend, Oregon. Frank's place was open for business, and I was still watching. What would you do if you were in my position? Would you have given Kenneth a second chance? Or would you have cut him off completely? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This story was sent to us by a listener who wanted to remain anonymous. If you have a story of family betrayal and justice that you'd like to share, send it to our channel. Your story could be next. Thank you for reading Dorothy's journey. Remember, family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty, respect, and love that never turns into harm.